Beneath the surface of the world, beneath the sidewalks, the forests, the deserts, the quiet plains lies another realm entirely. It is a place built not of myth, but of stone, silence, and intention. A place shaped by hands that no longer exist, by cultures that left little behind except for the echo of their chisels, the faint dust of their rituals, and the sealed doors they meant no one to open again. When you picture the earth, you picture what rises above it. Mountains, rivers, ruins, cities. But the deeper truth is that humanity has always carved downward, as much as it has built upward. And in doing so, it left behind a second world, one hidden in plain sight, waiting beneath our feet. For as long as people have told stories, they have whispered about these places. Long corridors hidden beneath temples, gateways to the underworld concealed beneath pyramids, secret vaults hollowed into mountains, entire cities dug deep into rock so soft it crumbles beneath the touch, yet somehow shaped into perfect hallways, smooth chambers, flawless ventilation shafts. These are not the creations of one culture or one moment in time. They appear in Turkey, Mexico, Peru, China, Russia, the American Southwest, civilizations separated by oceans, centuries, beliefs and, yet united by the same impulse to hide something beneath the earth. Some of these subterranean worlds are officially acknowledged. Archaeological sites open for tours, chambers mapped by lasers, tunnels documented in academic journals. Others are sealed behind iron gates or political denial, patrolled by armed guards, their true purpose hidden behind bureaucratic smiles. Some have been rediscovered by accident, after a wall collapses, after a pond drains, after rains wash away the layer of soil that concealed an entrance for 1,000 years. And some are known only through folklore, the kind passed from elder to child, the kind that carries the fragile memory of a disaster, or a migration, or a place no longer meant to be found. But all of them, whether historical, mythical, or modern, raise the same questions. Why did humanity put so much effort into vanishing beneath the surface? What was so important, so sacred, so dangerous, or so transformative, that it had to be carved into darkness? And why, even now, do governments continue to build downward, creating networks of tunnels that stretch further than the roads above? The deeper we look, the more the pattern emerges. In times of danger, people went below. In times of ritual, they descended into carefully engineered labyrinths where sound reverberated in unnatural ways and light died before reaching the walls. In times of secrecy, rulers and priests sealed away their knowledge in chambers that glittered like the night sky. And in times of war, modern nations expanded the same instinct, hollowing mountains and deserts to hide weapons that must not be seen. These are not isolated curiosities, they are footprints of a long continuum, thousands of years of humanity moving downward for reasons that are practical, spiritual, or forbidden. Take a moment and imagine peeling away the surface of the earth like the top of an anthill. The streets disappear. The buildings vanish. What you are left with is a map of branching corridors and ancient voids that stretch for miles in every direction. Some are carved so precisely that engineers still struggle to explain how they were constructed. Some are shaped to disorient the mind, bending sound and perception until the human sense of self collapses. Some hold rivers of mercury and walls coated in minerals that shimmer like starlight. And some are nothing more than yawning blackness, extending so far into the limestone that explorers still fear getting lost forever. Many of these places remain off limits even today, locked behind government fences, guarded by military instructions that do not explain themselves, marked on maps only as blank spaces. And even in democratic nations, entire underground worlds exist that the public will never be allowed to see. Yet the pattern they continue echoes the pattern of the past. The deeper the tunnel, the greater the secret it protects. So when we ask what lies beneath us, the answer is never simple. It depends on the landscape, on the culture, on the fear, faith, or power that shaped the stone. But across continents, across thousands of years, one truth repeats. The underground is where humanity hides what matters most. Think of everything ancient builders constructed above ground: temples, monuments, pyramids, and then consider what they chose to hide instead. The underground is where danger was survived, where gods were met, where rulers concealed their power, where mysteries were born. And the strangest part is not that these worlds exist, it is how many of them remain sealed. How many entrances are buried by chance or by design? How many kilometers of shadowed passageways have never seen a modern flashlight beam? This story begins not with myth, but with a simple truth. The world below has never been fully explored. What we know is only what we have uncovered by accident or through persistent curiosity. What remains hidden may dwarf everything we have found. And every time archaeologists peel back another layer, the earth answers not with certainty, but with more questions that echo through the tunnels and chambers like a whisper rising from below. As we descend into this journey, we won't treat these discoveries as unrelated anomalies. We will trace them as a connected pattern, a whisper running across continents and centuries. From the underground city that could shelter 20,000 people in Turkey, to the shimmering Mercury River beneath a Mexican pyramid, to the Peruvian labyrinth engineered to alter the mind. To the Chinese caverns no dynasty ever recorded, to the natural mazes that stretch like arteries across the planet, to the miles of modern nuclear tunnels governments pretend not to speak about, and finally, to the legends that say some tunnels do not end with human hands at all. What emerges from these threads is a picture not of chaos, but of intent. Humanity's greatest secrets were never left in plain sight. They were buried, hidden, sealed. And as we begin with the first descent into the ancient stones of Cappadocia, you may find yourself wondering not just what lies beneath the earth, but why so much of our story has been written in the dark. If the world beneath our feet truly holds the remnants of forgotten eras, then Derinkuyu is the first doorway we must step through. It begins not with an expedition or a discovery funded by a university, but with a single man in the 1960s, repairing his home in the soft volcanic rock of Cappadocia. As he knocked down a wall, he expected stone. Instead, he found a hole dark, cold, and impossibly deep. That accidental break in the plaster was not just a crack in his home, it was a crack in history, revealing an entrance into one of the largest underground cities ever constructed by human hands. And no one alive had any memory of it being there. Derinkuyu drops nearly 85 meters into the earth, more than the height of a modern 20-story building turned upside down, but downward is only the beginning. The city sprawls horizontally across 18 levels, each carved by chisels that left only the faintest marks in the stone. And throughout those levels lies a design so deliberate, so intricate, that even today archaeologists cannot explain how it was achieved with the technology supposedly available at the time. Walking into Derinkuyu feels like descending into a vault designed by minds who understood both architecture and human psychology. The corridors are narrow not by accident, but by strategy. In times of danger, only 1 or 2 defenders could guard a passage, forcing invaders into single-file vulnerability. Then there are the circular stone doors, each weighing up to half a ton. They roll into place with an elegant inevitability. A single push seals off entire sections of the city. It's defensive engineering that modern military planners still admire, despite the fact that the builders wielded no steel and had no mechanized tools. And beyond defense, Derinkuyu shows signs of sustainable, long-term life underground. Storage rooms carved into the rock, vast communal halls, wine cellars and oil presses, stables for livestock, kitchens and smoke vents. A vertical ventilation system so advanced that fresh air still travels through the shafts, today some of which descend as deep as skyscrapers. These aren't the remnants of a temporary hideout. They are the infrastructure of a civilization that expected to live, worship, eat, sleep, and perhaps wait for generations beneath the surface. Mainstream archaeology offers explanations, each practical in tone. They tell us Cappadocia was repeatedly invaded by Persians, by Byzantines, by Mongols. They say this city was a bunker designed for refuge, a place where villagers vanished for days or weeks until the danger above had passed. And certainly, that is part of the story. But the deeper we walk, the harder it becomes to accept that explanation on its own. If Derinkuyu was only a wartime shelter, why build chapels deep in the heart of the city, with vaulted ceilings and careful inscriptions? Why install wineries and storage rooms crafted for long-term use? Why carve such an enormous multi-level labyrinth when shallower refuge tunnels would have sufficed? And most unsettling of all, why does not a single ancient text, inscription, or official record mention its construction? Cappadocia is not a remote jungle where history might be lost. It is a crossroads of empires, a place with deep written traditions. And yet Derinkuyu appears nowhere, not in chronicles, not in trade records, not as a tribute to kings or a feat of engineering. It is as though the people who built it wanted their work to be remembered by stone but forgotten by memory. Even stranger is the scale beyond Derinkuyu itself. Cappadocia has dozens of other underground cities, Kamakli, Zakonik, Mazgsum, small, others sprawling. Many are separated by only a few kilometers, and for decades, rumors have persisted among locals that hidden tunnels link them together, forming a network that might span miles beneath the plateau. Archaeologists admit that blocked passages suggest something once connected these sites, though erosion and collapses have obscured their reach. If true, then Derinkuyu might not be a city at all, but a hub, a central node in a subterranean web designed for a purpose we have yet to understand. Consider the staggering labor involved in carving these spaces. An estimated hundreds of thousands of tons of volcanic rock would need to be removed, carried out, and disposed of, and yet no debris field has ever been found. No quarry piles, no rock dumps, nothing to show where the material went. A city this size should leave scars on the surface, but it doesn't, as if the earth itself swallowed the evidence. And so the questions multiply. Was Derinkuyu expanded over centuries, each generation inheriting a project whose original purpose had already faded from memory? Was it built all at once by a culture with engineering knowledge, more advanced than what we assume existed at the time? Or was it designed as both sanctuary and secreta, dual purpose combining survival and ritual in ways we no longer understand? Some researchers suggest that its function went beyond self-preservation. The presence of religious spaces hints at ceremonies carried out beneath the earth, away from the world above. A place where communities might have believed they were closer to ancestors, deities, or the hidden forces of the underworld. If caves have always symbolized crossing thresholds between worlds, then Derinkuyu might have been more than a refuge from danger. It might have been an entrance into a sacred geography that mirrored their cosmology. But another thread lingers, the possibility that Derinkuyu's original builders are unknown not because records were lost, but because they were intentionally erased. A structure this grand, this precise, and this deeply hidden suggests a deliberate desire to vanish from the surface world entirely. Whether to avoid catastrophe, persecution, or something more enigmatic, Derinkuyu feels less like a temporary hiding place and more like a deliberately hidden alternative society. What makes this even more compelling is how Derinkuyu remained undiscovered until the 20th century. Not because it collapsed or decayed, but because its entrances were sealed. Entire passageways packed with stones. Access points covered over as if someone, long ago, decided the time of the underground city had ended and sealed away not only the chambers, but their memory as well. And now, as we stand in its silent corridors, we are left with a contradiction. Derinkuyu is undeniably real, undeniably human, undeniably intentionally and yet utterly inexplicable in its scope and secrecy. If this much could lie beneath a single town in Turkey, how much more could be hidden across entire continents? It's this question that guides us next. Because while the Cappadocians dug for survival and secrecy, in Mexico, ancient builders carved something even stranger beneath their pyramids and underworld, not built to shelter life, but to mirror the cosmos itself. If Derinkuyu forces us to question how ancient people could carve entire cities beneath the earth, then Teotihuacan forces us to confront a different question altogether. Why would a civilization go to such extraordinary lengths to recreate an underworld beneath one of the greatest cities of the ancient Americas and then seal it so completely that no one would enter again for nearly 2,000 years? The discovery began not in a temple or a tomb, but in the rain. In 2003, storms battered central Mexico, soaking the ground around the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the third largest pyramid in Teotihuacan. One downpour cracked the earth just enough to open a sinkhole near the temple's base. Local archaeologist Sergio Gomez was called to investigate, expecting erosion, perhaps a small cavity. But as he lowered himself into the opening, his light revealed something no one had anticipated, an entrance deliberately blocked by massive stones. Stones placed not by accident, but by ancient hands intent on sealing whatever lay beyond. When Gomez squeezed past the blockage, he found himself inside a tunnel long, perfectly aligned with the pyramid above, and utterly untouched since antiquity. The air was stale, as if it had been holding its breath for centuries. He walked deeper, nearly 100 meters into the earth, until the tunnel widened into chambers beneath the very heart of the temple. These were not rough caves or natural fissures. The walls were carved smooth, the ceiling reinforced, the floor leveled with careful precision. This was architecture, not geology. And then Gomez's team found the offerings. Thousands of them. Jade figurines, carved shells from distant shores, obsidian knives, intricate pottery, mysterious sculptures with inhuman faces. But the strangest discovery shimmered across the floor of the final chamber, a thin pool of liquid mercury, glinting like a silver river in the torchlight. Mercury, highly toxic, rare, difficult to mine, difficult to transport. In ancient Mesoamerica, it should not have existed in this quantity. For decades, scholars believed no pre-Columbian culture had the means nor the reason to use it. Yet here it was, sealed in darkness, waiting. Why would a civilization pour liquid metal into a tunnel beneath a pyramid? Some researchers propose that it symbolized an underworld river mirroring the mythic waters, separating life and death. Mercury's reflective surface could have acted as a gateway, a shimmering boundary meant to represent the cosmic divide between worlds. Others suggest it formed part of a ceremonial landscape, a kind of sacred microcosm of the universe recreated underground, where initiates or priests descended to perform rituals far from the eyes of the public. This interpretation gains strength when we look at what coated the walls. Powdered pyrite, fool's gold and hematite. Under the flickering flame of a torch, these minerals sparkle like stars. Standing in those chambers 2,000 years ago, a priest may have been surrounded by glittering constellations on all sides, above a river of liquid silver, a night sky carved into the earth, a cosmos below the ground. And then there were the mysterious orbstone spheres coated in reflective minerals. Some say they represent planets, others see them as symbols of fertility or power. Whatever their meaning, their presence adds another layer to a carefully constructed underworld that was never meant for the living in any ordinary sense. This was not a shelter, not a refuge like Derinkuyu. It was a stage, a realm of transformation, a place where rulers or priests descended to commune with forces they believed shaped the universe. If Derinkuyu was built for survival, Teotihuacan's tunnel was built for secrecy and for ritual. What makes this even more extraordinary is that Teotihuacan remains one of the most enigmatic civilizations on Earth. Despite being a city of more than 100,000 people, no royal tombs have been found, no names of rulers, no dynasties, no inscriptions identifying kings or queens. Unlike the Maya, who carved their history into stone, Teotihuacan hid theirs. Deliberately, it seems. What if the answers lie not above ground, but below? Some scholars believe the tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent may have held the remains of rulers, kings, or priests whose identities were concealed, their burials sealed off from the world to keep power centralized behind a veil of mystery. But no bodies were found. Only offerings, only symbols, only tools of ritual and transformation, which raises a possibility even more unsettling. Perhaps the tunnels were never meant to contain physical remains at all. Perhaps they were designed as a symbolic underworld or place where the city enacted its creation myths, where leaders were reborn into power through ceremonies hidden from the public. And then, when the rituals ended, the tunnels were sealed forever. Teotihuacan didn't just build upward into the sky with its massive pyramids, it built downward just as deliberately. The Avenue of the Dead, the grand boulevard lined with monumental structure set, its counterpart concealed beneath the earth, a secret mirror world only the elite would ever see. And Teotihuacan is not done revealing its secrets. Radar scans in 2018 detected another possible tunnel beneath the Pyramid of the Moon still unexplored. Excavations in the 1970s uncovered yet another beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. Again and again, the same pattern appears. Sealed passages, hidden chambers, evidence of deliberate concealment, a city obsessed with the underworld not as metaphor, but as architecture. When you place Teotihuacan beside Derinkuyu, a picture begins to form. One city dug down to survive earthly danger, the other dug down to reach the divine or to hide sacred knowledge. In both cases, the deepest secrets, the true power, the greatest mysteries were placed not on mountaintops, not in royal palaces, but underground, beneath layers of stone, sealed away from sunlight and memory. And as strange as Teotihuacan's underworld is, our next descent takes us somewhere even more unsettling, not into chambers built for survival or cosmic ritual, but into tunnels engineered to change the human mind itself. If Teotihuacan built an underworld to mirror the cosmos, then Chavín built one to alter the human mind. And unlike the Grand Pyramids or sprawling cities of Mesoamerica, Chavín power does not announce itself on the surface. The temples above ground appear ordinary at first glance, stone platforms, plazas, stairways weathered by 3,000 years of rain and silence. But this is only the skin of the place. Its true purpose lies in the dark labyrinth hidden below. A world carved not for shelter or burial, but for psychological transformation. Situated high in the Peruvian Andes, Chavín flourished between 1200 and 500 BC, long before the Inca, before Machu Picchu, before most of the great Andean cultures we know today. Its priests did not leave grand murals or decipherable texts to explain what they built. Instead, they carved galleries beneath the earth, twisting tunnels, sudden chambers, dead-end corridors, acoustic traps, and hydraulic channels. These passages were constructed so deliberately, with such precise understanding of sound, water, light, and darkness, that stepping inside them feels less like entering a temple and more like entering a machine designed to rewire the senses. Imagine walking down a stone passage barely wide enough for a single person. The air cools. Your footsteps echo strangely, bending around corners and returning distorted. Ahead, a narrow turn plunges into total darkness. Beneath your feet, a hidden channel roars with rushing water. The sound vibrates through the walls, like the growl of something massive lurking in the depths. You feel it in your chest more than in your ears. Without light, time begins to stretch. Every sound becomes a threat or a message. Every breath feels amplified. The mind starts inventing shapes in front of you. Now imagine that in this darkness, someone blows a conch shell trumpet. Archaeologists testing these instruments inside the tunnels discovered something staggering. The acoustics of the galleries transform the blasts into overwhelming, animal-like roars that ricochet in every direction. These sounds do not feel human. They feel alive, predatory, inhuman, resonant with a force that seems to come from the stone itself. To an ancient initiate, perhaps already fasting or taking hallucinogenic plants, the effect would be total fear, awe, surrender. The dissolution of the boundary between self and something larger. This was by design. Chavín's tunnels were not random. They were engineered to create sensory overload, to disorient, destabilize, and ultimately reshape the consciousness of those who entered. The builders knew how water amplifies sound, how echoes can be manipulated, how darkness alters perception. They used these principles with a sophistication that modern psychologists recognize instantly, controlled stimuli leading to profound psychological transformation. Deep within this labyrinth stands the Lanzon, a towering granite monolith carved with the image of a fanged, snarling deity. It is one of the most iconic sculptures in all of ancient Peru. Reaching it was once an ordeal, twisting through narrow corridors, plunged into darkness, confronted by echoing roars, guided only by priests and the distant rumble of water. When an initiate finally emerged into the chamber containing the Lanzon, disoriented and exhausted, the sight of the deity looming above would have carried immeasurable power. In that moment, the boundary between myth and reality dissolved. The god did not feel carved, it felt present. Some believe the entire journey was a symbolic death and rebirth, a ritual descent into the underworld followed by a spiritual transformation. Others see it as initiation, a process that rewired the mind to accept the authority of Chavín's priestly class. And some theorize that the tunnels were used to simulate communication with the divine, with priests using acoustic tricks to speak from inside the walls or from behind the monolith. Whatever the interpretation, one truth is clear: Chavín was not a fortress. It was not a refuge. It was not a burial site. Its tunnels were not meant to house thousands or to hide rulers. They were instruments carefully tuned, consciously crafted to manipulate human experience. If Derinkuyu represents the engineering of survival, and Teotihuacan, the engineering of the cosmos, then Chavín represents the engineering of consciousness. This raises an immense question. Where did the inspiration for such architecture come from? Is it possible that myths of underworld journeys common in the Andes, Mesoamerica, and beyond originated from places like this, where the descent into darkness was literal and transformative? Were early religious experiences shaped not by visions alone, but by the environments crafted to produce them? Some anthropologists believe that many ancient underworld myths are not metaphors but memories and coded accounts of rituals in places like Chavín. In these stories, people descend into dark, sacred spaces, confront supernatural forces, then emerge with new knowledge. This pattern mirrors the physical and psychological stages an initiate would have experienced inside the labyrinth: descent, disorientation, revelation, ascent. And just as Derinkuyu echoes in the myths of hidden refuges, and Teotihuacan mirrors stories of underworld rivers and cosmic realms, Chavín resonates with tales of shamans traveling through spiritual tunnels connecting the worlds above and below. It is as though every ancient culture, in its own way, encoded the same idea. The underground is where humanity meets forces beyond itself. But at Chavín, this belief was not abstract. It was carved into stone, engineered into architecture, woven into ritual. It was a technology one that used darkness and sound instead of gears and metal. As we leave these shadowed galleries, blinking back into the daylight of the Andes, we carry with us a new understanding. The underground is not merely a place to hide or preserve, it is a place to transform. A place where the mind itself becomes the terrain. And yet, as we follow this chain of subterranean mysteries, we will find that some cultures described underground realms far larger than any temple or ritual site. Vast kingdoms stretching beneath mountains, hidden cities ruled by ancient kings, worlds lit by their own inner suns, legends that, for centuries, were dismissed as fantasy. But when we place them beside the tunnels we've already explored, they no longer feel like isolated myths. They feel like the next logical descent, because if tunnels can shelter life, and tunnels can model the cosmos, and tunnels can alter consciousness, then what if some tunnels point toward places we once believed could not exist? By the time we leave the darkened passages of Chavín behind, a pattern has already begun to form. The deeper ancient cultures went into the earth, the more those descents blurred the boundaries between the physical and the mythic. And nowhere is that blurry frontier more visible than in the stories of vast subterranean kingdoms, realms said to stretch for thousands of miles beneath mountains, deserts, and ice. These stories appear across Asia, Europe, and the Americas, whispered by mystics, recorded by explorers, and woven into esoteric traditions. Some dismiss them as fantasy, others see them as coded memories of places long lost. But either way, they refuse to disappear. They persist, as though part of our collective memory knows to look downward when searching for origins. One of the most famous of these stories comes from a Polish explorer named Ferdynand Sandowski, in his 1922 book Beasts, Men, and Gods. He recounts conversations with Mongolian lamas who spoke of a hidden realm called Agartha, or sometimes Agartha, deep within the earth. According to their teachings, Agartha was ruled by a powerful figure known simply as the King of the World. His realm was self-sustaining, illuminated by an inner energy source, protected by ancient technologies, and connected to the surface through secret tunnels that opened only to those with spiritual authority. The people of Agartha were said to possess knowledge kept from the surface world, intervening only in times of great crisis to guide or judge humanity. To modern ears, it sounds like myth. And yet the geographic specificity of the tale is intriguing. The Mongolian lamas did not describe a spiritual metaphor but a literal underground kingdom stretching beneath Central Asia. They pointed to deserts, mountains, and remote caves as potential gateways, real places, not imagined ones. They spoke of it the way some cultures speak of ancestral homelands, with certainty, reverence, and caution. Then there is Shambhala, described in Tibetan Buddhist texts, not as a fantasy, but as a hidden realm of wisdom and enlightened rulers. In many accounts, Shambhala is a physical place, concealed from the ordinary world by mountains and terrain that shift like illusions. Some versions even describe its entrance as a passage leading downward, into caverns illuminated by an inner radiance. To the Tibetans, Shambhala was not the home of mythical beasts or demons. It was the refuge of knowledge preserved in secret until the world was ready to receive it again. When placed beside Agartha, the similarities are impossible to ignore. A hidden kingdom, a powerful ruler, ancient knowledge, secret entrances. A realm beneath or beyond the visible world. The names and cultural contexts differ, but the core motif remains the same. These are not random stories, they are echoes. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, these echoes merged into a single controversial idea, the hollow Earth theory. Early proponents believed the planet contained vast interior spaces, possibly even an inner sun and entire world hidden beneath the crust. Entrances at the poles, volcanic vents, or high mountain passes were said to serve as gateways. These ideas were embraced by occult societies, spiritualist groups, and fringe scientists, each interpreting the legends according to their own beliefs. Some saw Agartha and Shambhala as inner Earth civilizations. Others viewed the story as symbolic, representing inner enlightenment rather than geography. But the deeper question is not whether the Earth is literally hollow. Modern science tells us it is not. The deeper question is, why did so many cultures around the world come to believe in vast subterranean realms at all? Where did this idea originate, and why does it appear in places separated by oceans and millennia? Consider this. Before Derinkuyu was discovered, people doubted that ancient humans could build large underground cities. Yet there it was, a metropolis for 20,000 people, hidden beneath a modern town, sealed so effectively that not a single local legend remembered it existed. Before Teotihuacan's mercury-lined tunnel was uncovered, no one imagined that ancient Mesoamericans engineered shimmering cosmic underworlds beneath their pyramids. And before archaeologists mapped the labyrinth at Chavín, no one guessed that a 3,000-year-old culture had built tunnels designed to alter consciousness itself. So if underground cities can vanish from human memory for thousands of years, if entire underworlds can be sealed, erased from history, hidden beneath layers of stone and soil, if the Earth itself can swallow temples, tunnels, and chambers until only legend remains, then is it truly impossible that stories of underground kingdoms originated as memories of real places now collapsed, flooded, or lost entirely? This is where myth becomes a kind of archaeology. The more we uncover beneath the surface, the more plausible these ancient stories begin to seem, not as literal descriptions of inner suns or immortal kings, but as distorted recollections of underground worlds once inhabited by people facing disaster, invasion, or ritual transformation. Agartha may not be a glowing subterranean empire, but perhaps it remembers the idea of underground refuges, places of safety during catastrophes, long before history was written. Shambhala may not be a hidden valley of immortals, but perhaps it remembers the centers of spiritual power built in caves and caverns, accessible only to initiates. And the hollow Earth may not be a scientific claim, but a metaphor for the vast realms beneath the surface that humanity once retreated into and then forgot. What makes these legends compelling is not their literal interpretations, but their persistence. Across Asia, across Europe, across the Americas, the same pattern appears. A collective memory of descent. A belief that wisdom, power, or survival lies below. And in the archaeological record, we find the physical proof that ancient people did indeed build downward on a massive scale. The myths exaggerate, they embellish, but they do not arise from nothing. They arise from a world where tunnels, caverns, and underground cities were not rumors, they were reality. And as we turn from Asian legends to the traditions of indigenous peoples in the Americas, we find something even more striking. Cultures that do not speak of underground realms as fantasies, but as the very place humanity came from. Because while Agartha and Shambhala describe hidden worlds of wisdom, some American traditions say something far more direct. We lived below once, and we emerged into the world we know only after the last catastrophe ended. Across the Americas, stories of the underworld are not tales of distant paradises or symbolic kingdoms. They are stories of origin, memories of where humanity once lived. And unlike the legends of Agartha or Shambhala, which describe hidden realms reached only by the chosen few, these traditions speak of entire peoples emerging from beneath the earth after disasters wiped away earlier ages. The idea is so consistent, so widespread, and so detailed across so many nations that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Something is being remembered, even if time has blurred its edges. Among all these traditions, the Hopi of the American Southwest carry one of the most vivid accounts. According to their oral teachings, the world we inhabit now is not the first. It is the fourth world. The previous worlds were destroyed, one by fire, one by ice, one by water. In each cycle, only a small remnant survived, and during the most recent destruction, that remnant was sheltered not on mountaintops or in boats, but beneath the earth, guided by spiritual beings through a narrow opening into a cavernous underworld. Inside that realm, the Hopi say, humanity lived in darkness, but was protected until the surface became habitable again. Only then did their ancestors climb upward through a small passage, a symbolic birth. Canal into the light of this present age. That moment is still remembered today in their underground ritual chambers called kipazas, each of which contains a symbolic opening known as the Saipapu, representing the portal from which their ancestors emerged. This is not a peripheral myth. It is central to Hopi identity, told not as metaphor but as history. The Navajo, living in the same region, share a strikingly similar narrative. multiple worlds destroyed, a long period of refuge in subterranean realms, and a final ascent into the world we know. The Cherokee, far across the continent in the southeastern forests, speak of hidden people who dwell beneath the earth, occasionally emerging but largely remaining out of sight. The Mandan of the northern plains once told of ancestors who lived underground until the time of emergence, climbing upward through a great opening in the earth. These peoples were separated by thousands of miles, languages, and environments. Yet the pattern repeats: catastrophic destruction, survival below, emergence above. What makes these accounts even more fascinating is how they align with archaeological discoveries like Derinkuyu. In Turkey, an entire population once descended beneath the ground, sealing themselves off from danger, sustained by a city carved into volcanic stone. The act of going underground to survive is not speculation. It happened. It happened on a scale large enough to support tens of thousands of people, and it happened in a form so advanced that modern engineers still puzzle over the logistics. So when indigenous peoples say their ancestors sheltered beneath the earth during a cataclysm and emerged only after the danger passed, it no longer sounds like pure myth. It sounds like a cultural memory. What could have caused such a memory? Ancient floods, volcanic eruptions, droughts, the end of Ice Age climates. Even if their stories do not describe literal caverns designed like those in Cappadocia, the underlying concept, refuge below, rebirth above, matches perfectly with what archaeology now confirms as a human survival strategy. But these myths do something even more intriguing. They blend survival with cosmology. In the Hopi worldview, the underground realm was not simply a bunker. It was a place of transformation, a place where humanity was reshaped, purified, prepared for the next age. The emergence into the fourth world is told not as a physical relocation but as a spiritual rebirth. Just as the tunnels of Chavín altered consciousness and the chambers beneath Teotihuacan represented the underworld, the subterranean realm of the Hopi represents both sanctuary and spiritual transformation. This fusion of physical refuge and metaphysical meaning appears everywhere in American traditions. The Cherokee describe underground worlds as places where time flows differently, where beings with greater wisdom reside. The Navajo speak of layers of existence arranged vertically, each accessible through passages that mirror real geological features: caves, crevices, volcanic vents. Even in South America, Andean myths tell of ancestors living beneath the earth before emerging into valleys and mountains that would become their homelands. If these myths emerged independently, the parallel structure would be astonishing, but they did not. They emerged from cultures whose ancestors lived through dramatic climate swings, megafloods, volcanic winters, and forced migrations. They lived through events capable of erasing entire settlements, forcing people to seek refuge wherever they could find it. And in landscapes filled with caves, lava tubes, and underground rivers, the earth itself offered shelter. These experiences would not have been forgotten. They would have been and myths, once established, survive long after the details fade. But something else stands out. In many of these traditions, the underground is not simply a place where humanity hid. It is a place where beings other than humans reside: guardians, teachers, watchers, sometimes benevolent, sometimes indifferent, sometimes dangerous. The Hopi speak of the Ant People, mysterious entities who cared for humanity during its underground refuge. The Navajo speak of spirits who dwelled in the earlier worlds, some of whom did not ascend with humans. The Cherokee speak of a lower world populated by unseen forces, parallel to our own but hidden. These beings are not described as extraterrestrial. They are described as subterranean, which raises a question that echoes uncomfortably through all these accounts. Are these stories describing metaphysical beings? Symbolic archetypes, or memories of encounters with people or cultures who already inhabited the depths when refugees first entered? It is impossible to know. But it is telling that nearly every tradition embeds two ideas simultaneously. Humanity sheltered underground, but humanity was not alone there. Across continents, this belief persists. It may be symbolic, it may be psychological, or it may be a remnant of actual encounters in shadowed places long since collapsed, flooded, or devoured by time. What we do know is that the underground was once central to how these cultures understood their own origins and survival. It was a place of beginnings and rebirth, a place where danger was faced and overcome, a place that shaped identity. And just as these ancient peoples held memories of vast subterranean realms, so too did civilizations on the other side of the world, civilizations that carved immense underground structures with no explanations, no records, and no apparent purpose. Which brings us to China. Because in 1992, an accident revealed a network of hand-carved chambers so large, so precise, and so inexplicable that even in a country obsessed with record-keeping, it appears to have been erased from history deliberately or otherwise. A place where the past remains sealed behind dark water, waiting for someone to drain the last pool and reveal what lies beneath. If the stories of emergence remind us that ancient peoples saw the underground as a place of refuge and rebirth, Then the discovery at Longyou forces us to confront something stranger. Entire subterranean complexes so vast, so meticulously carved, and so mysteriously undocumented that they seem to have slipped through the cracks of history entirely. Not half remembered, not mythologized, simply gone. As if someone built them, used them, and then made sure no one would ever recall who they were or why they carved so deeply into the stone. The Longyou caverns came to light in the summer of 1992, when villagers in Zhejiang province decided to drain an old pond. For generations, the water had pooled in a quiet depression in the landscape, the kind of feature no one questions. But when the last of the water was pumped out, what appeared beneath stunned the villagers. It was not a natural basin. It was an entrance. And behind that entrance was a hand-carved cavern of astonishing proportions. Soon, more ponds were drained, and more caverns emerged, over 20 in total, each enormous, each carved with a precision that defied expectations. As archaeologists descended into the chambers, they realized the scale of what had been uncovered. Some of the caverns rose nearly 100 feet high, their ceilings supported not by crude buttresses but by massive stone pillars left deliberately uncut. The walls and ceilings were smooth, shaped into flat planes and sharp corners, as if carved by an army of artisans working in perfect coordination. Every surface was covered in identical parallel chisel marks, thousands upon thousands of them applied with meticulous consistency, and yet the caverns were empty, perfectly empty. No pottery shards, no tools, no inscriptions, no carvings, no soot from torches, no broken stone debris from construction, no signs that anyone had ever lived, worshipped, or stored anything inside them. The chambers looked less like places people used and more like places people prepared and then abandoned before the first footprint was ever set inside. To carve even one of these caverns would have required removing massive amounts of sandstone, roughly 1 million cubic meters across the entire site. Even with modern equipment, that volume would represent a monumental project. With ancient tools, the task becomes almost incomprehensible, and yet no dynasty, no local record, no oral tradition mentions the undertaking. In a civilization as obsessively documented as China's, this absence is almost more shocking than the caverns themselves. If these chambers were quarries, as some have suggested, then why were the walls finished with decorative chisel patterns? Why are the chambers shaped with such symmetry and precision? Why is there no rubble left behind? And why, this is the largest question, would anyone create quarry pits of this size underground, where extraction is far more difficult? If they were tombs, where are the bodies? Where are the inscriptions? Where are the valuables that would accompany elite burials? If they were ritual spaces, where are the altars, murals, offerings, or symbolic objects that define every other ceremonial site in ancient China? None of the usual explanations survive contact with the evidence. Compounding the mystery is the fact that several caverns remain partially flooded to this day. Their lower levels are still submerged, cold and dark, hiding whatever may rest at the bottom. These flooded chambers have never been fully drained or explored. It is possible the deepest floors contain carvings, artifacts, or clues sealed away since antiquity. Or it is possible that those spaces were intentionally meant to remain underwater, designed that way from the beginning. But perhaps the strangest detail is this: the caverns appear to have been carved all at once. The chisel patterns, pillar styles, and spatial layouts show no evolutionary phases, no remodeling, no expansions added by later generations. It is as though a single entity, whether a ruling power, a cult, or a community, carved all of it in one monumental push, then vanished without leaving a single word behind. It is here, in this silence, that the Longyou caverns become something deeper than an archaeological puzzle. They become a mirror reflecting the limits of our historical narrative. If a civilization could carve out an underground complex of this magnitude and disappear from memory entirely, what else might have been erased? What other vast projects might lie beneath ponds, hills, or farmlands, waiting for some accident to pull back the curtain? Some researchers suggest the caverns were hidden, intentionally sealed by flooding, forgotten by design, erased to protect whatever purpose they once served. Others argue they were abandoned when something went wrong, leaving the chambers pristine and unused. A few speculate about cataclysmic floods that filled the caverns and wiped out the people who built them. And there are those who propose even stranger possibilities: that the caverns represent a technology or knowledge that was lost, or perhaps a cultural tradition that left no trace because it ended abruptly. Whatever the truth, Longyou exposes a larger pattern. The underground is where the gaps in our historical memory become most visible. In ancient China, where emperors documented grain harvests and eclipses with obsessive detail, entire caverns spanning millions of cubic meters still slipped into oblivion. In Turkey, Derinkuyu hid beneath homes for centuries. In Mexico, tunnels filled with mercury lay sealed under pyramids for 2,000 years. The earth is layered with forgotten worlds, and Longyou is one of the clearest reminders of how complete that forgetting can be. As we leave the silent chambers behind, their walls dripping with groundwater, and their floors submerged in cold darkness, another question comes into focus. If human hands could carve these caverns and erase them so thoroughly, what about the spaces nature carved on its own? Spaces so vast that even with modern mapping, modern lights, modern tools, we still cannot reach their ends. For beneath Kentucky's rolling hills lies a labyrinth that dwarfs every underground structure humanity has ever built, natural or otherwise. A place where direction, sound, and sanity slip away. A place that proves the earth does not need human engineering to hide secrets. A place called Mammoth Cave. If the Longyou caverns reveal how human hands can carve out a world and then erase the story behind it, Mammoth Cave reveals something even more unsettling. The earth itself has been hiding worlds long before humanity learned to scratch at its surface. These natural labyrinths were not designed with purpose, but their scale, complexity, and silence are so overwhelming that they feel engineered cathedrals of stone, shaped not by intention, but by eternity. And in their depths, the boundary between geology and myth dissolves. Mammoth Cave, in central Kentucky, is the largest known cave system on Earth. More than 420 miles of passages have been mapped, an astonishing number in its own right, but explorers believe this is only a fraction. Some estimates push the true length beyond 600 miles, perhaps more. To grasp that scale, imagine an underground maze stretching the distance from London to Paris, twisting through chambers and corridors carved by millions of years of flowing water. And what we've found so far is only what we've managed to crawl through. The cave does not move downward in a single plunge like the deep abysses of the Caucasus. Instead, it sprawls horizontally, layer upon layer, like an underground continent. Long corridors stretch on for miles in straight lines, before collapsing into crawl spaces so tight that explorers must slide on their stomachs, feeling the rock press against their ribs. Then suddenly, the stone opens into enormous chamber spaces so huge that voices echo 5 times and 12 times before fading into blackness. Some ceilings disappear into shadow, unreachable even with powerful lanterns. Others are low enough to scrape the back. Walking through Mammoth Cave is like traveling through geological time. Ancient rivers carved these tunnels long before humans walked North America. Long before mammoths roamed the plains above, long before the continents took their present shape. Some walls still hold the signatures of those rivers. Rippled limestone, scalloped surfaces, layers of sediment marking forgotten floods. Other chambers contain dry, silent pools, their surfaces undisturbed for centuries. In these places, even time seems reluctant to move. Long before European settlers arrived, indigenous peoples ventured deep into the system. Thousands of years ago, they left behind woven sandals, torch remains, and even mummified bodies that the cave's dry climate preserved almost perfectly. These early explorers mapped sections of the cave using flickering firelight, navigating the darkness with astonishing bravery. Some may have entered the depths seeking minerals, others may have entered for ritual, pilgrimage, or reasons now lost. The silence of the cave has kept their secrets. Centuries later, in the 1800s, Mammoth Cave became a commercial wonder. Visitors came for tours, researchers came to study its geology, and miners came to extract saltpeter, an essential ingredient in gunpowder. Yet even as the cave became known to the outside world, its reputation grew darker. Stories spread of ghostly lights flickering in distant corridors, of cold winds rushing through sealed passages, of travelers who wandered too far and were never seen again. Some of those stories are recorded in painful detail. The most famous is the tragic saga of Floyd Collins, a caver who became trapped in a narrow passage in 1925. For 2 weeks, rescuers tried desperately to free him as journalists broadcast updates nationwide. Crowds gathered above ground, but the cave won. Collins died in the darkness, and his body could not be safely retrieved. His story became a legend, a reminder of the cave's quiet, indifferent power. Modern explorers describe sensations that echo those earlier fears. Mammoth Cave, they say, can feel alive. Air shifts without warning. Sounds carry strangely through distant chambers. In total darkness, the human mind invents shapes, movements, whispers. When lanterns fail and, they sometimes do, the blackness becomes absolute, like a physical force pressing against the eyes. The body sways, time stretches, the line between imagination and reality blurs. More than one explorer has reported hearing voices that vanish the moment light returns. And yet, despite centuries of exploration, vast sections remain untouched. Some corridors are too dangerous. Some passages end in pools filled with toxic gases. Some routes require diving into submerged tunnels, where the roof of rock hangs inches above the water's surface. In these places, visibility drops to nothing, and the cave becomes a sensory void. It is possible that entire networks of passages lie beyond these submerged choke points, never mapped, never entered, never seen by human eyes. This is where Mammoth Cave becomes more than geology. It becomes a mirror reflecting the human psyche. If nature can carve an underground world hundreds of miles long, complex enough to bewilder modern explorers, deep enough to swallow entire expeditions, then the idea of hidden spaces, secret tunnels, or lost civilizations no longer seems far-fetched. Nature itself built structures on a scale greater than anything humans created before the age of industrial machinery, and it hides them effortlessly. The existence of Mammoth Cave raises a question that echoes back to Derinkuyu, Teotihuacan, Chavín, and Longyou. If the Earth naturally produces labyrinths capable of running hundreds of miles, and if humans throughout history sought to hide their most sacred, dangerous, or powerful creations below the surface, then how much of the underground world remains unknown to us, not because it is mythical, but because it is simply inaccessible? And if this is what nature can do, what about the tunnels carved by human powers today? Tunnels built not for ritual or refuge, but for strategy, for weapons, for survival in a world where danger is no longer myth but geopolitical reality. Underground cities still exist, but now their purpose has shifted. They no longer shield priests or pilgrims. They shield missiles. And in China, one of the largest subterranean networks ever constructed, lies beneath mountains and farmland, hidden, sealed, and nearly impossible to map. A modern empire below the surface, built not for faith or transformation, but for war. For thousands of years, humanity carved tunnels to survive against invaders, against famine, against catastrophe. But in the modern age, the purpose of going underground has shifted. We no longer hide people, we hide power. And nowhere is this more evident than in the sprawling tunnel systems built by modern nation-states, vast subterranean networks whose scale dwarfs even Derinkuyu and Mammoth Cave, and whose purpose is not spirituality or refuge but strategic survival in a world armed with nuclear fire. Nowhere illustrates this shift more dramatically than China's underground Great Wall. The name sounds like folklore, but this network is entirely real, confirmed by satellite images, leaked state footage, military reports, and the testimony of analysts who have spent decades trying to piece together its true size. While ancient tunnels sheltered communities of thousands, this modern system may stretch for more than 3,000 miles, long enough to cross the entire width of the continental United States. It is not a single tunnel, but a labyrinth that winds beneath mountains, plains, and entire provinces. Its purpose is chillingly straightforward: to store, protect, and mobilize China's nuclear arsenal. Entrances are disguised as hillsides or cliffs. Blast-proof doors are sealed behind layers of rock. Reinforced corridors run wide enough for missile transport vehicles, massive, multi-axial carriers that can shift warheads from one hidden silo to another. These tunnels form a moving, vanishing network of potential launch points. Even if satellites detect a missile at one location, the weapon can be relocated miles away, underground, unseen. The result is a system built to guarantee retaliation no matter what strikes the surface. But what makes the underground Great Wall even more enigmatic is its secrecy. Official Chinese sources acknowledge the network exists, but they claim it houses only a modest arsenal, perhaps a few hundred warheads. Western analysts, however, point out that a system of this magnitude could conceal far more. Some estimates range into the thousands. Others argue that the true number may be nearly impossible to calculate due to the labyrinthine mobility the tunnels provide. If the weapons can move, then stockpiles cannot be pinned to a single site. They vanish, not into the sky, but into the earth. In leaked footage aired briefly on state television in 2009, missile transport vehicles were shown rolling through the tunnel's vast concrete corridors lit by fluorescent lights. After international attention surged, such footage was never shown again. The glimpses we have are fragments, shadows, but they confirm what the satellite images already suggested. Beneath northern China, a military ecosystem thrives in silence. There are rumors, whispers from defectors, scattered investigative reports of entire subterranean cities within this network, not metaphorical ones, but literal underground installations capable of housing soldiers, engineers, and command staff for extended periods. Maintenance bays, communication hubs, fuel depots, training tunnels, large enough for vehicles to maneuver. If true, the underground Great Wall is not just a weapons depot. It is a hidden world designed for wartime continuity, functioning independently of the surface. This brings us to a sobering thought. Thousands of years ago, Derinkuyu sheltered people from invading armies. Today, tunnels shelter weapons meant to end armies and nations entirely. But China is not alone. Across the Eurasian continent, in the Ural Mountains of Russia, lies another subterranean giant, Mount Yamantau. From the outside, Yamantau appears unremarkably a forested massif, dotted with mining towns and fog. But from the sky its mystery becomes visible. Throughout the Cold War and into the 1990s, American satellites captured images of massive construction around the mountain. New rail lines cut into its flanks. Highways tunneled directly towards sealed entrances. Entire towns appeared seemingly overnight to house thousands of workers. Yet the Russian government gave only vague, shifting explanations. Food storage, mining projects, cultural repositories. None of these explanations matched the scale. Yamantau is believed by many intelligence agencies to be one of the largest underground military complexes ever built, potentially capable of housing tens of thousands of personnel in the event of global nuclear conflict. Some estimates suggest it spans more than 400 square miles of underground space. Others believe it contains weapons manufacturing facilities, advanced communication centers, or even command shelters for Russia's leadership and entire shadow capital hidden inside a mountain. What makes Yamantau especially unsettling is its persistence. Even when Russia's economy collapsed in the 1990s and salaries went unpaid, the tunneling continued. Funding dried up for countless domestic programs, but Yamantau endured quiet, prioritized, and off-limits. To this day, the Russian government says almost nothing about it, and the more silence surrounds it, the more speculation grows. Together, the Underground Great Wall and Yamantau form a new chapter in the history of the underground, one where states do not carve tunnels with stone chisels or torchlight, but with industrial drilling machines and classified budgets. One where tunnels do not echo with prayers or conch shells, but with the hum of diesel engines hauling nuclear warheads through reinforced corridors. Yet even these megastructures are not the end of the story. Because if ancient tunnels preserve the memory of what humanity feared and modern tunnels hide what humanity threatens, there is one frontier where legend and IA secrecy blur again, where tunnels are said to hide things that no official agency will ever confirm. A place where the United States' deepest military secrecy meets a story too extraordinary to verify, yet too persistent to dismiss. A place called Dulce, and its most controversial witness, a man whose testimony divides believers and skeptics to this day, Phil Schneider. In the final section, we descend into that frontier where myth, conspiracy, and classified engineering collide. If Yamantau is the modern inheritor of ancient secrecy, then Dulce is the modern inheritor of ancient myth, the place where stories of tunnels, hidden realms, and unseen forces converge into something that feels less like a chapter of history, and more like a fracture line between worlds. Whether true, false, or somewhere in between, the Dulce-based narrative pushes us to confront the oldest human fear, not that something exists above us, but that something exists below. The story begins with a man named Phil Schneider, a geological engineer who claimed to have worked on deep underground military construction projects, DUMS, during the 1970s. To most of the world, Schneider was a footnote until he stepped on stage in the mid-1990s and said something that no one expected to hear out loud. According to him, the United States was building a vast tunnel network beneath remote parts of the Southwest tunnels, large enough for trains, installations, deep enough to be missed by satellites, and facilities designed for classified research, far from any civilian oversight. But his claim didn't stop at engineering. It went somewhere darker. Schneider said that during excavation near Dulce, New Mexico, workers accidentally broke into a cavern that wasn't empty. Inside, he said, were entities already occupying the space, beings not from the surface. According to his account, a firefight erupted. Dozens of soldiers were killed. Schneider himself was injured by a weapon he described as nothing known on Earth. And after the incident, he claimed the base became a joint facility, operated by both humans and non-humans. The details he described were as shocking as they were specific. Laboratories conducting genetic experiments, tanks of biological material, levels accessible only by clearance tiers, increasingly secretive floors as one descended, entire departments compartmentalized from each other. It reads like fiction, and maybe it is. There is no document proving Dulce base exists. No confirmed photos. No whistleblower beyond Schneider, and a handful of unverified sources. Official agencies dismiss the entire story, and yet this is where the narrative becomes complicated. It refuses to die. It circulates in forums, in documentaries, in whispered conversations among locals. Because Dulce, unlike most urban legends, isn't tethered to nothing. It's tethered to a pattern. Locals in the area have reported for decades unmarked helicopters flying low at night, strange lights near the mesa, vibrations in the ground as if heavy machinery were operating deep below, access roads that appear and vanish, unexplained sounds in the canyons. None of these prove anything, but none of them fully disappear, either. They accumulate like layers of sediment, thin, individually, heavy when stacked. Then there is Schneider himself. He died in 1996, under circumstances his family describes as suspicious. Officially, it was ruled a suicide. Supporters believe otherwise. Skeptics argue he struggled with health and psychological issues. Believers argue he was silenced. Skeptics point to inconsistencies. Believers argue inconsistencies appear when someone speaks under pressure or fear. No side has enough evidence to win. What matters is not the literal truth of Schneider's claims, but what they reveal about the human relationship with the underground. For thousands of years, cultures described beings beneath the earth. The Hopi spoke of the ant people. Tibetan texts described hidden sages in subterranean realms. Medieval Europe whispered of gnomes, dwarves, and hidden folk. Central Asian mystics spoke of Agartha and Shambhala. Indian priests conducted rituals in tunnels designed to simulate contact with gods. These are not identical stories, yet they orbit the same gravitational center, the underground, as a realm of others. Dulce is the modern iteration of that, not mythic, not religious, not symbolic. Instead, technological, clinical, sterile, a 20th century version of an ancient pattern transformed by the vocabulary of laboratory science and Cold War secrecy. Even if everything Schneider described was fabricated or misunderstood, it resonates because it fits the long-standing human belief that the most powerful, sacred, or dangerous things are not kept above, they are buried. And when we step back from the individual story of Dulce and look at the entire journey we've taken from Derinkuyu's sealed stone doors to Teotihuacan's Mercury River, from Chavin's psychological labyrinth to Longyou's impossible caverns, from Mammoth Cave's natural infinity to China's nuclear tunnels and Russia's hidden cities, a single truth emerges. The underground is where humanity hides what matters most. For ancient peoples, it was survival, ritual, transformation. For classical civilizations, it was cosmic symbolism and gateways to other realms. For modern governments, it is weapons, continuity, and control. For myths and conspiracies, it is knowledge we are not meant to know. The surface world is for agriculture, trade, monuments, and wars. The underground is for secrets. Always has been. And so the final question is not whether Dulce Base is real, or whether Schneider told the truth. The final question is broader. How much of human history and human presence still lies buried below our feet, sealed behind stone, water, secrecy, or silence? We have excavated only fragments. We have mapped only a sliver. We have explored a fraction of the caves, the caverns, the abandoned tunnels, the natural voids, the sealed corridors built by civilizations we barely understand. The deeper we dig, the more the earth answers with another question. What else are we missing? The final pages of human history are not upward, they are downward, into darkness. Into places carved by ancestors or engineered by modern powers. Into spaces built for survival, ceremony, secrecy, or reasons we may never fully comprehend. And so we end where we began, with a world beneath the world. A world of tunnels, chambers, corridors, sealed doors, and hidden realms. A world of memory and myth. A world waiting to be uncovered. And now I pose the question to you. Do you believe Dulce is only legend? Or a reflection of truths governments would never admit? Share your thoughts below, because your perspective shapes where our next ascent will lead. And if you seek the next hidden place, the next sealed tunnel, the next mystery buried beneath the surface, the journey continues in the video on screen now. As always, stay curious.